All of these pieces that are in light green is what Crowbar will help you get up to speed on. And once you have those pieces in place, then Crowbar will help you actually install OpenStack on top of it. So that's what I'll be showing here with the Crowbar install. So here we have Crowbar coming up. Well, actually, the operating system coming up here. As soon as that loads up, I'm going to go install Crowbar. Let's look at how Crowbar works while that's coming up there. So we talked about DevOps, and the way Crowbar works, so I'll go back here, is this is a diagram that helps you understand how Crowbar works. So Crowbar basically uses a Chef server under the hood, and Chef is the way we manage all the resources in the infrastructure. And it has other things that on top of it, which helps you go from bare metal. Chef doesn't deal with bare metal. It doesn't deal with BIOS and RAID configurations. It doesn't deal with some of the networking pieces that you have to deal with. You know, you have to create VLANs and you have to set up things such that everything is communicating in the right way. So think of Crowbar as a master orchestrator. So it's soup to nuts, end to end, starting from bare metal, and it uses Chef as it needs it during that process. So what happens is once we install Crowbar, we're going to bring up several bare metal nodes. Think of it as a set of machines that you just ordered from Dell, and they show up on your doorstep, and now you rack and cable them and you power them up. And from that point on, Crowbar discovers, which is really what happens in this first phase here, which is called the Crowbar configuration. It goes through a whole cycle, a hardware cycle, and I'll show that state machine in a second. What it'll do is it'll discover the hardware on the node, then it'll go install the operating system, and then at that point you can decide what you want that node to be. You can assign a personality to it. You can say, I want this node to be a compute node. I want to install Nova on it. Or I want this to be a controller node. So based on the kind of role you want it, you can then specify in the Chef's recipes or bar clamps how you want that to be configured. And I'll go through that process here in a second. As this node comes up, we will install Crowbar. So we can see that it's coming up here. It'll be so we have so the admin node is booting up. I'm going to log into this admin node, and I will go ahead and install Crowbar. So when Crowbar installs, it's going to bring up all those operational services I talked about earlier. And let me go ahead and kick this off. The install script is in this location. And then I'm going to kick off the install process, and it'll be the admin.crowbar.com would be my domain name in which I'm going to install Crowbar. So this will get the install process started. So you can, while that's going on, we will go back and see what are the other things that are coming up here. Crowbar-install. Oops, something wrong. C0 minus I minus R minus S. Am I typing something wrong? Let's see. So this will just show you what's happening in the background. Something's not right. Did it start? So I think I just need the screen function. There you go. So this process is now running in the background. You can see that it's bringing up the Chef client. It's going to install the Chef server and all the other pieces that I showed you earlier. So it's going to bring up Ganglia. It'll install the Crowbar, the Chef server right here. And once it's ready, we will see that it'll show up here in the Crowbar user. So as soon as it comes up, we should be able to see the user interface here. So while that's going on, let's continue with how Crowbar installs things. So we talked about the different layers. So we have the physical resources layer. Right now it is laying down the bits that are needed to configure the IPMI, the network pieces of it, the RAID configurations. So that's what it's doing now as we are installing Crowbar. And then it'll set up an NTP server, a DNS server. The admin node itself is the DNS server. It's setting up a logging mechanism. And the Crowbar itself has its own broad clamp. So it's all those bits are being laid down on the admin node as we speak. So as soon as it does that, then we will have the opportunity to decide, then we can start bringing in nodes into the system, right? So you have Crowbar up and running. You have all the basic infrastructural operational pieces in place. Now we will start bringing up some of the nodes into the equation here. So let's go ahead and create a few nodes. As this is still running here, it's installing the bar clamps. We will go ahead and create a couple of additional nodes. So let's go ahead. My plan is to add 2 Nova nodes and 1 Swift node. So I'll go ahead and clone a couple of nodes here to get those going. So that's my node number 1, which would eventually become my, okay, I'll call it something else. I'll call it node 11. Okay, so there's one node that I just created. I'm going to go ahead and create another one for my second Nova node. So that's node 12. And then I'll create a third node, which I want it to be a storage node or a Swift node. So there's my third node. And then finally, I want a node which is going to host all the controller functions. So when we get to the OpenStack installation, you will see that there are a number of services that are used by the rest of the OpenStack installation. Things like image service, authentication service, and there are controllers that are required for Nova and Swift. So I want that to be node 4. So I'll go ahead and create another node that'll act like this controller node. So that would be my node. Okay, so let's see where the Crowbar install is at this point. Let's go back to the VMware installer and see where it is at. So go back to the admin node. So it's still going through. You can see it's installed a whole bunch of bar clamps, the initial bar clamps that I was just showing you back here. So all of these bar clamps have been installed, and you'll see that in a second as soon as the UI comes up. So hopefully this should be able to get going here. So there you go. So now we have the UI, the Crowbar UI up and running, and you can see the admin node is coming up. This is spinning, which means it's still updating the different services. So the IPMI interface is up, and a few other roles. They'll start coming up as the node cycles through and Crowbar gets completely installed. And there's also Nagios, which gets loaded. Let's see if it's up and running yet. No, it's not yet. Okay, so we'll wait for that to come up. And then there's also, we have the Chef server, which is running in the background. as well as so we'll wait for that to come up here in a second. So okay, so it's going through a cycle of hardware installed states. So this is an important diagram. You'll see this throughout the installation. So what happens is when you bring a brand new node into the system, Crowbar recognizes it as a raw node and it goes into a discovery mode. So it discovers all the features of that node, the hardware configuration, the number of CPUs, the memory, networks, number of NIC cards, brings up all that information, it discovers the node, and then it waits for the user for input. You know, what do you want this node from a hardware perspective, right? Do you want this to be a Nova node, or you don't have to take that decision here. You can make that decision later. But if you decide it's a Nova node, then the appropriate chef recipe will get executed, and the node will be allocated appropriately. So let's see where we are with the installation here. Go back to, so it's getting ready here. You can see, we go back to the Crowbar UI. So you can see it's in the final phases of bringing up all these other bar clamps. So there you go. You've got Ganglia up and running, the chef server up and running, and Nagios up and running. So let's see what we have for Nagios. It's not there yet. It's still coming up. And you should have Ganglia up and running. There you go. So as we installed Crowbar, it actually installed the Ganglia services, the Ganglia server for all the monitoring of your hardware. It installed a chef server. There's a chef server that's running in the background, and it also installed Nagios, which should be here shortly. Let's see, is this up? There you go. So Nagios is up. So once Crowbar finishes, you have the base operational infrastructure up and running. And at this point, you're ready to bring in new nodes. So let's see whether this is finished. Yeah, it's going through the final process here. So what I can now do is start powering up these nodes. So let's wait for Crowbar to come up completely at this point. It's still here. It's waiting. So it's in the final stage. There you go. So it says admin node is deployed. Now I'm ready to start bringing in new hardware. And Crowbar will identify, discover, and bring up the different pieces of it. So here we go. All right, so let me go back here, and I'm going to go start powering up each of these nodes. And when I power them up, they will pixie boot from Crowbar. So let's watch this node coming up here. So this is, I just powered up node 1.1. So what will happen is the Crowbar is the Pixie server for this, so it will pull down the Pixie boot image, and it will start installing a small CentOS image, which will then go off and discover all the different pieces of hardware that are on this node. So let's see if that's going to happen now. So there you go. So you can now see that this is Pixie booting. So I'm going to go off and power up all these other nodes. And as I do this, Crowbar will identify them, and you will see them on the UI screen shortly. All right, here we go. So you'll notice that you'll see some temporary machines, test machines come up as Crowbar provisions those things. So this is part of the validation step that Crowbar takes to make sure that all the settings are correct and it is properly configured, etc. So that's really what's going on here. And you can see all the bar clamps, the basic bar clamps are done. So let me show you while those nodes are getting discovered, let me show you the bar clamps section here. So all the bar clamps, as I said, bar clamps are just components of Crowbar. It's componentized, and each of these things are used for specific purposes. So you can see BarClamp has deployed DNS. It deployed Ganglia. It has the IPMI BarClamp. The logging system is up and running. The networking BarClamp is ready to go. Nagios is up and running, and Provisioner and NTP are up and running. So we've got all the basic operational services up and running at this point. Now what we're doing is bringing up the nodes. As we're just powering up the nodes, and as I said, as we power up the nodes, what's happening is this PXE boot stuff is happening. So the machines are getting PXE booted, and the hardware discovery process is going on. So we can see, if you go back here to the nodes, so you'll see that they're being PXE booted. So let's go to mode. So you can see they're loading here.